Buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving headfirst into shock.
That's right.
And it's going to be a wild ride.
It is. It's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, we got a listener request
Wait,
to
that's it.
really unpack this one. And we've got some great material to work with.
Absolutely.
An audio lecture, learning objectives, even slide summaries. We've got it all.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
But let's be honest, who wants to just memorize dry medical terms? We're going for real understanding here.
Absolutely, yeah. The goal is to equip everyone listening with the knowledge they need
Right.
to actually recognize and respond to shock in a real-life situation. Because let's face it, this stuff can be life or death.
Absolutely. No pressure.
None at all.
Okay, so first things first, shock. The textbook definition, are you ready for this? Inadequate cellular perfusion.
Catchy? Right.
I mean, I get it, it's medicine, but still.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more intimidating than it actually is.
Okay, so how about we break that down? What's actually going on in the body when we talk about inadequate cellular perfusion?
Sure. Think of it this way. Your cells are like those tiny little factories,
Okay.
working nonstop to keep your body running smoothly. But just like any factory, they need a constant supply of power to do their jobs.
Makes sense. So what's the power in this scenario?
That power comes from, you guessed it, blood.
Okay, blood makes sense.
It's like the delivery system. It carries oxygen to your cells.
All right.
It carries glucose. It carries water. All those essential ingredients for energy production.
So inadequate cellular perfusion, if I'm understanding this right, means those little cell factories aren't getting the supplies they need.
Exactly. It's like a supply chain breakdown, but for your body.
And what happens when those factories start shutting down? What happens to us?
That's when things get serious. Your organs can't function properly. Systems start to fail. It could be like a whole body power outage.
Okay, power outage. Now that's an analogy I can get behind. And speaking of analogies, our sources keep mentioning this thing called the perfusion triangle. What's that all about?
It's a really helpful way to visualize those different things that can actually cause shock. Imagine a triangle.
Right, I'm picturing it.
3 sides.
Okay.
The first side, that's the heart.
Okay, the heart, got it.
Then you've got the blood vessels. Those are like the second
The
side.
blood vessels, okay.
And then the blood itself makes up the third side.
So heart, blood vessels, blood, we've got ourselves a triangle.
Exactly. And each part has to work properly for the whole system to function. Think of your heart like a powerful pump, kind of like the main power station for a city.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The blood vessels, those are the network of power lines, right?
Yeah.
Carrying the energy throughout the city.
Right, makes sense.
And then the blood itself, well, that's the electricity flowing through those lines, delivering the vital oxygen and nutrients to every single house, every business, every cell in the city.
So, to sum it up,
Yeah,
the heart is the pump, the blood vessels are the power lines, and the blood is the electricity.
you got it.
And if any part of that triangle breaks down, the whole system is in trouble.
Exactly. Hence, perfusion triangle. It's all connected.
So let's say the pump itself fails, the power station goes offline.
That's like what we call cardiogenic shock right there. Means the heart's not pumping effectively and the whole system starts to suffer.
Oh, so that's where cardio comes in. It's all about the heart. What about if something's blocking the power lines?
Good one. That's a perfect way to think about obstructive shock. Imagine, I don't know, a tree falls on a main power line.
Oh no, blackout.
You got it. Something is physically blocking the flow, and just like that, no power. In the body, this could be something like a blood clot, for example.
That makes total sense. So we've got the pump failing, and we've got blockages. What about the electricity itself? Can something go wrong there?
Absolutely. Remember how we said blood carries those essential things like oxygen and nutrients? Well, imagine there just isn't enough to go around.
Oh, that doesn't sound good. What would cause that?
Well, a couple things. It could be from losing a lot of blood, maybe from an injury, or sometimes it's about being severely dehydrated. Either way, you don't have enough fluid in the system, and that's a big problem.
And that's what you'd call...
Hypovolemic shock. Hypo meaning low, volemic, referring to volume. Low blood volume, basically.
Got it. Low blood volume, the electricity is low. Then there's... Hold on, was there something about a power surge?
Yes, that's a great way to think about it. Imagine all the power lines suddenly dilating, getting wider. So you've got the same amount of electricity trying to flow through a much bigger system. Pressure drops, and nothing gets enough power.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does that translate to the body?
Well, it's all about the blood vessels in this case. This is what happens in what we call distributive shock. Your blood vessels dilate too much, which causes a dangerous drop in blood pressure.
Wow, okay. So, to recap, We've got four main types of shock, each with its own unique power grid malfunction: cardiogenic, obstructive, hypovolemic, and distributive. I'm already starting to feel like I understand this so much better, but before we go any further, I have to ask about something else I keep seeing. Compensated versus decompensated shock. What's the difference?
I'm glad you asked. That is a really important distinction.
Okay, good. I was hoping you'd say that.
So think about our city power grid again. You know how sometimes during heat wave maybe, the lights might start flickering?
Oh, yeah, definitely. A little ominous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what's happening with compensated shock. The system is strained, it's trying its best to maintain power, but it's getting a little unreliable. You might see some warning signs, maybe the lights are dim, your appliances are acting up, but the power is still technically on.
So with compensated shock, our body's like, hold on, I got this, but it's struggling.
Exactly. It's sending out warning signs, trying to tell you something's wrong, just like those flickering lights.
And are those warning signs something we can actually see and recognize?
Absolutely they are. And that's what we're going to get into next.
Okay, so our body's sending out an SOS like, hey, something's wrong here. What kind of signs should we be looking for? What are those flickering lights telling us?
Well, one of the biggest ones is a rapid pulse.
Okay, makes sense. Heart's beating faster.
Right, your heart is working overtime, trying to pump that blood faster, trying to compensate for the decreased pressure in the system.
So it's like it's trying to make up for the lack of power by pushing harder.
Exactly. You might also notice the skin feels cool, maybe a little clammy.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that before, like someone's skin is cold and clammy.
That happens because your body is actually redirecting blood flow to the most vital organs, trying to keep those functioning.
So it's like it's sacrificing the extremities to protect the core.
Exactly, it's a survival mechanism.
Mhm.
And because of that, the extremities, like your hands and feet, they might feel cold, they might look pale.
So our body is basically playing triage, trying to keep the most important things running. What else? What other signs might we see?
You might see some anxiety, maybe some restlessness.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just physical, it can be mental and emotional too.
Exactly. Remember those stress hormones we talked about?
Right. Those are kicking in.
They can definitely cause those feelings of anxiety, that sense of impending doom. Sometimes people even feel nauseous.
Nausea, like you want to throw up.
Yeah, exactly. Because remember, the digestive system, it's not getting as much blood flow now.
Right. It's all about priorities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things you might see in that early stage, that compensated shock.
Okay, got it. Compensated shock. Rapid pulse. Pale and clammy skin, maybe feeling anxious or nauseous. But what happens if things don't improve? What if those flickering lights, they just go out completely?
That's when we move into decompensated shock. That's the full-blown power outage, so to speak. And that's when things can get really serious. The body just can't keep up anymore.
And that's when we see the really scary symptoms, right? Like the blood pressure dropping.
Right, that's the one everyone thinks about, and it is a serious sign. But here's the thing.
Okay.
Falling blood pressure, as critical as it is, it's often a late sign, especially in children.
Really? So a kid could be in serious trouble, but their blood pressure might still seem normal.
Exactly. They can maintain a normal blood pressure even when they're losing a lot of blood,
Yeah.
which is why it's so important to look the whole picture, not just rely on one single sign.
Wow. Okay, so blood pressure alone isn't enough. What other red flags should we be watching for in decompensated shock? If the blood pressure isn't reliable, especially in kids, what else is there?
Well, pay close attention to their mental state.
Okay, like are they thinking clearly?
Exactly. They might seem confused, maybe really lethargic, or even unresponsive.
So if they're not acting like themselves, that's a bad sign.
It could be, yeah. Also, their breathing might change.
Okay, like how so?
It might become really shallow or really rapid, kind of like they're struggling to catch their breath.
So difficult or irregular breathing, definitely not good. Anything else?
And their skin might change color too.
Their skin. In what way?
It could take on this kind of grayish, almost bluish tinge, sometimes even mottled looking.
Okay, and that's because...
Because the circulation is so poor, that's a sign that those organs just aren't getting the oxygen they desperately need.
Okay, so decompensated shock, we're talking altered mental state, labored breathing, and skin that's lost its color. That all sounds really serious.
It is serious. That's why recognizing those early warning signs, that's absolutely critical. Like we were saying, shock, it's not a one and done kind of thing.
And change quickly.
Exactly. It can change rapidly. So you have to keep reassessing, keep looking for any changes.
This is all such valuable information. So we've got our four main types of shock. each with its own power grid problem, so to speak, and we've talked about how to spot the signs of compensated and decompensated shock. Let's say for a second that we want to, really bring this home for people. What are some real-world situations where we might actually encounter these different types of shock?
I like the way you think. Let's do it.
Perfect. All right, so let's talk real-world scenarios. Let's say, okay, imagine this. You're at a sporting event, maybe it's a hot day, and you see someone collapse.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Yeah, and they're sweating a lot, their skin is clammy, and their pulse is racing. Thinking back to everything we've talked about, what kind of shock could this be?
Okay, so we've got a hot environment, they're sweating, clammy skin, rapid pulse. It definitely sounds like their body's struggling to keep up with the heat. I'm thinking it could be hypovolemic shock.
Hypovolemic shock, you're saying, like they're losing blood volume, but they haven't been injured, have they?
Not necessarily. Remember how we talked about dehydration?
Right.
Severe dehydration, especially on a hot day like you're describing, that can also lead to a dangerous drop in blood volume.
Wow. That's a really good reminder that even those less obvious scenarios, they can escalate really quickly.
They really can. You got to stay vigilant.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second. Let's say you come across a car accident.
Okay?
Someone's injured, they're pale, their pulse is weak, and they're breathing really fast. What are we thinking here?
Car accident, you're right. That raises the alarm bells right away.
Right, there could be some serious injuries.
Absolutely. With the paleness, the weak pulse, the rapid breathing. Yeah, hypovolemic shock from blood loss is definitely a major concern.
Makes sense given the situation. Okay, new scenario. You're with a friend, they get stung by a bee, and suddenly they're developing hives, their face is swelling up, and they're feeling dizzy. What's going on there?
Oh, that's a classic anaphylactic reaction.
Anaphylactic shock.
Right. And that is a true medical emergency.
Definitely. Hives, the swelling, the dizziness, those are all big red flags, and it can happen so fast.
It can.
Yeah.
And those allergic reactions, they can be life-threatening, which is why early recognition and intervention are so important.
Absolutely. Speaking of intervention, we've covered a lot about recognizing shock, all the different types, the signs, the symptoms. But let's get practical here. What can we actually do about it while we're waiting for EMS to arrive?
Okay, so first things first, safety, safety, safety. Always make sure the scene is safe for you before you approach anyone who might be in shock.
Right, because you can't help if you become a victim yourself.
Exactly. So once you determine it's safe, call 911 immediately. Don't even hesitate.
Got it. Call 911. Then what?
Okay, so assuming they're conscious and don't have any obvious injuries, help them lie down and elevate their legs about 12 inches or so.
Okay, elevate the legs. Why is that important?
That helps to improve blood flow to those vital organs, kind of redirects things.
Got it. What if they're bleeding?
If there's bleeding, control that first. Apply direct pressure to the wound with a clean cloth if you have one.
Like a t-shirt or something.
Exactly. Anything to help stop the bleeding. And if it's a limb injury and you know how to apply a tourniquet, you can do that as well.
Okay, that's good to know. What about their airway? Should we be checking that?
Absolutely. If the person's unconscious, you want to make sure their airway is clear.
Mm.
And even if they are breathing, tilting their head back slightly can help keep the airway open.
Okay, what about keeping them warm? I know that's important too.
It is. Shock can cause a drop in body temperature, so try to cover them with a blanket or a coat if you have one. And finally, try to stay calm and reassure them.
Easier said than done, maybe, but so important.
It is. Shock is a terrifying experience, and just having someone there, staying calm, it can make a huge difference.
Wow, we've covered so much today.
We have.
It's amazing how much there is to know about shock, and it's all about, empowering ourselves with this knowledge so we can act quickly and potentially save lives.
I completely agree. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to our health. Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, this has been our deep dive into shock. Stay safe, everyone.